Good morning, Harbor Covenant. If we haven't met, my name is Matt. I'm glad that you're here. I want to talk about our nose for a minute. Actually, I've learned a lot. When you become like a transitional lead pastor and they put you up front a lot and you have to say things, you better make sure what you're saying you kind of know something about. So I've learned about noses this week. Your brain uses your nose as a kind of tripwire for your memories. You kind of know that, but here's biologically what's happening. There's something called the olfactory bulb that sits just above your nasal cavity, and it processes smells at a high-speed connection, like 50 milliseconds per sniff, and sends all that info to your amygdala and your hippocampus and your orbital frontal cortex. I'm not a doctor, so if you are, and I got that wrong, please tell me. But these are the places that process your emotion and your memory and your learning. And so when it smells like cookies or salad, when you smell them, it invokes feelings of maybe like home or comfort or warmth or childhood kitchens. Campfire smoke, for example, might bring back like a crisp memory of favorite camping trips growing up, or autumn nights, or storytelling. And maybe the smell of baby powder invokes powerful feelings of nurturing and safety and early parenthood and messes all over the household. And here are some for me. These are things that I can smell vividly, I think, at any time. But when I actually smell them, I just know that, this means something. The first is, I don't know what they make the water at the Pirates of the Caribbean ride in Disneyland, but it has a distinct smell, and you know it if you've been there. The second is the smell of sauteed onions and beef patties at an In-N-Out burger when you walk in. Those of you from California, you know the pain of not living near one. It just takes me back to my adolescence, where I got all my lunches. But maybe the one smell that always takes me back and I have vivid memories of is breakfasts and beach. So our family grew up going to Santa Cruz, the Santa Cruz beach area every summer, and we would rent a house, and my grandmother would cook breakfast, and I'd come down, and it would smell like linguiça and salt air. And for some, that combination is great for me. Linguiça sticks with you for like the rest of the day. But the smell of beach and breakfast brings back so many powerful memories of favorite times of my childhood. And I'm sure you have some too. What's wild is that the nose triggers not only, that same biological mechanism not only triggers good memories, but it can trigger some painful ones as well. For example, you might be walking down the aisle at a grocery store and you smell a specific laundry detergent or a cheap cologne, and bam, you're transported back to like the Denny's parking lot when you just got your heart broken by some girl. Or you're suddenly, the smells bring back just great memories and feelings, but it can also bring back a lot of baggage and wreckage that we hold on tightly. As Mike said, our current series is called Back to Life. And we're talking about how the same Spirit of God that brought Jesus back to life is at work in our lives today, and what other things is it bringing back to life. And today we're looking at resurrecting relationships, so dead relationships. And here's what I'll suggest, is that every dead relationship that you have has a crime scene. And that crime scene probably has a trigger. It might be smell, it might be sight, it might be something. But for example, smell of alcohol and cigarettes might trigger a lot of feelings of a bad home life and past trauma. The exact song that was playing on a radio, the moment you got a phone call that changed everything, the next time you hear that song, you're going to remember. Or maybe it's a word that was used against you that's just wiggled itself so deep into your brain that every time you hear it, you tense up and you get defensive. And this is especially true when it comes to people we love. Every fractured relationship has a dead space in our lives. It has an epicenter. It has a scene of the crime. If you think about a relationship in your life right now that feels lifeless, maybe it's a cold marriage or an estranged child or a friendship that's dissolved into bitterness, there's usually a specific moment where that all went south. And maybe it's the dining room table where the last words that you spoke you can never take back. or a specific tone in the voice, or a slammed door, or just silence in a car ride can bring back a lot of memories. And there's something in that moment where it all died that our senses have just latched onto, and we will not forget it. And so what do we do with these relationship crime scenes? I think the easiest thing, there's a couple different things you could do, but the easiest thing is to roll with me on the metaphor. Just wrap caution tape around the crime scene, swear you'll never go in it again, avoid all those triggers because we're human and pain's exhausting. And our natural survival instinct is just to avoid the crime scene at all costs. And so we might walk on eggshells. We might avoid certain topics at Thanksgiving meals. We settle for being polite instead of being honest. And if we have any hope of anything being resurrected, we like to give it a lot of time. Sometimes time doesn't heal everything. Like if you break your arm, time is not going to heal it back straight again. You have to address it. If you want a dead relationship to breathe again, you can't keep dodging the scene of the crime. You have to address it. And 2,000 years ago, we're going to look at a story where Jesus' closest friend had to do exactly that. This guy named Peter blew up his entire relationship with Jesus on a single night. And that trigger that brought back his absolute worst failure is the exact scene of his dead relationship. It was the smell of a charcoal fire. So if you have your Bibles and you want to turn to me, you can open to John chapter 18. It's also on the screen. You can follow along. But this is the exact moment where Peter's relationship with Jesus turned south. So Jesus has been arrested, and Peter is watching this take place, and he's hiding in the shadows. And verse 15 says, Simon Peter and another disciple were following Jesus because this disciple was known to the high priest. He went with Jesus into the high priest's courtyard. Basically, he had access to where Jesus was, so he took advantage of it. But Peter had to wait outside the door. The other disciple, who was known to the high priest, came back, spoke to the servant girl on duty there, and brought Peter in. Aren't you one of this man's disciples too? Are you? She asked Peter. He replied, I am not. It was cold, and the servants and officials stood around the fire that they had made to keep warm. Peter also was standing with them, warming himself. So again, it's the middle of the night. Everything has completely fallen apart. A few hours earlier, Peter has just puffed up his chest saying, Jesus, if they're going to kill you, they're going to kill me too. I will go with you to the end. But now that Jesus is arrested and Peter is in kind of like the enemy territory, and watching Jesus being mocked and beaten and falsely accused, everything changed. Peter's not there like he said he was. He's in the courtyard, but he's hiding. He's trying to blend in. And verse 18 gives us a detail that is very easy to read past, but it changes everything. It says the guards and the officials had made a fire to keep warm. And in the Greek, it makes specific, it says this is a charcoal fire, not a wood fire. And that's important. So log that away. We'll come back to that. So Peter's standing there. His hands are by the fire. The servant girl asks him, hey, aren't you one of this guy's disciples? And probably as casually as he could to avoid any kind of scene, he says, I am not. And then the Gospel of Luke says that in this moment, Jesus turns and looks straight at Peter because he knows what's just happened. And maybe you've experienced a moment like that where someone locks eyes with you and you know that things are different now, that you messed up, that trust is gone. You can almost hear the pain that's being caused. And this is the moment that the relationship died. Not really because Jesus, but this is the point where Peter couldn't come back from it on his own. So I want us to pause and look at this dynamic. And to be frank, Jesus holds the absolute moral high ground in this story. He has the undeniable right to be right in this situation. He has been deeply and intimately betrayed by his closest friend. And he has every justification in the world to wash his hands of Peter forever. And that's probably what Matt would have done if Matt was there. Thankfully, Matt wasn't. But when we are deeply hurt by someone we love, a spouse that speaks something with contempt, or a friend betrays our confidence, when a family member throws our past back in our face, our survival instincts kicked in. We have that right to be right. We build this massive wall. We cross our arms, we sit back and we say, you broke it, you fix it. I don't have to do anything. I'll sit right here until I realize what you've done and you apologize appropriately to me, and then maybe in my graciousness, I will like you again. It makes complete logical sense to me when you're the one who has been wronged to hold on to that right just to be angry. But I have to say, I've been a pastor for a couple decades now. It sounds really old to me. And I've watched a handful of marriages and families and relationships starve behind those walls of people just holding on to their right to be angry. I've learned that if you hold on to your right to be right, it might make you feel vindicated in the minute, but eventually you're going to look around and you're going to be alone. It's an incredibly isolating burden. So you can hold on to your pride, or you can hold on to the relationship, but you rarely get to hold on to both. And while we're sitting in our fortress of solitude, waiting for the other person to make the first move, essentially we're the ones cutting off the oxygen to the relationship, and it is slowly suffocating. I want to tell two stories this morning of my most painful mistakes that I've made as a pastor or someone in church ministry. The first one is this. I was a counselor at a camp in California. The camp was kind of unique. I don't know this. If you know me, you're like, you did this? Yes, I actually slept outside in a tent with kids and other adults and leaders, and we had an outdoor camp. And then we'd go on like hikes and stuff during the day. Some of you are like, I don't believe you. It happened. I promise. I went hiking. But what happened was we took, on one trip, we took our kids, and in this specific group was the son of my boss. So the person that runs the whole camp, his son was in my charge. He had a high case of autism, and I lost him in the woods for 4 hours. We just left him where we were. He didn't get on the bus. We had search and rescue in the woods, a helicopter. We had a tracker tracking his shoes. Eventually, we found him. Thankfully, he came through like a checkpoint with somebody that had picked him up and was trying to find his way home. And he had every right, and so did his family, to be mad at me. And I experienced the most grace from them. I remember going, Josh, I am so sorry. Can you forgive me? And he says, yeah, it's okay. It was just a mistake. I'm like, oh my gosh, you are the coolest kid I've ever met in my life. And then he turns to his parents and he goes, can I go back to camp with Matt? And I'm like, they're going to say no. But they're like, yeah, you can go back. And so we went back to camp. We didn't lose them again. We finished out the week. It was great. They hired me back the next year. They didn't give me the same job. I had to keep all the kids at camp, but just a tremendous amount of grace. They had every right to be angry. And I learned how much grace can change the outcome of a relationship. So please don't hear, I'm inviting you to let those toxic boundaries or boundaries against toxic relationships kind of dissolve and determine your life and let people walk over you. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that there's always a way to build something new because of the power of God. So be very slow in your choice to cut something off. Psychologists who study family estrangement, like Dr. Joshua Coleman, have found that cutting people off rarely bring the neat and clean peace that people expect. They say estrangement often essentially freezes the trauma in place. While it removes the immediate conflict, it leaves a psychological ghost. Choosing to engage in the messy, difficult work of reconciliation, even if it just leads to a functional, polite truce, often provides much better long-term psychological closure and peace than the lingering ambiguity of a permanent cutoff. So be very slow to cut somebody off. And so we're going to look at what God does in a dead relationship. If you fast forward a few weeks in the story to John chapter 21, it kind of picks back up again. This is John 21, verses 1 through 3. This is after Jesus has been raised from the dead. The disciples have already met Jesus 2 other times. And it picks up. It says, afterward, Jesus appeared again to the disciples by the Sea of Galilee. It happened this way. Simon Peter, Thomas, also known as Didymus, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and two other disciples were all together. Don't know why those two others didn't get noted, but whatever. And they say, I'm going to go fish, Simon Peter told them. And they said, we'll go with you. And they went out and got in the boat, but that night they caught nothing. This is wild. The resurrection has happened. They've met Jesus twice after he's beaten the grave, and you would think that Peter would be ecstatic to stand in standing in the front of the line, ready to take on the world. Except he isn't. Peter is back in a boat in Galilee, and he tells the other disciples, "I'm going to go fishing." And I think it's because his shame has become so heavy and so suffocating. And shame has told Peter that, yeah, Jesus is alive, but your relationship with him, that's gone. You broke that deal. It's dead, and it's going to stay broken. And when relationships hit a dead end, our instincts are always to retreat to what is more familiar and comfortable because we can control that. And for Peter, it was fishing in a boat with his nets. But Jesus refuses to leave him there. It picks up in verse 4. It says, early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples did not realize it was Jesus. And he called out to them, friends, haven't you any fish? No, they answered. He said, well, throw your net on the right side of the boat and you will find some. And when they did, they were unable to haul in the net because of the large number of fish. And then the disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, it's the Lord. And as soon as Simon Peter heard him say, it's the Lord, he wrapped his outer garments around him, for he had taken it off, and he jumped into the water. The other disciples followed in the boat, towing the net full of fish. They were not far off from the shore, about 100 yards. So early in the morning, Jesus is standing on the shoreline. He calls out. He performs this miracle that is very familiar to them. And Peter realizes it's the Lord. And he puts clothes on and he throws himself in the water. And you think that's weird, but he probably just didn't want to meet Jesus in his underwear. So he goes and he swims unashamedly into the water. And I want you to lean into what happens in verse 9. Verse 9 says, when they landed, they saw a fire of burning coals there with fish on it and some bread. A fire of burning coals. Jesus uses this very specific Greek word that was only used one other time. Do you know when it was? Back in chapter 18. It is a very specific word, and I don't think it was an accident. Jesus seems to be intentionally rebuilding the same sensory environment of Peter's greatest failure. And as Peter walks up to the beach, that smell of charcoal hits his nose, and that olfactory bulb sends like 50 millisecond per second relay to his amygdala and his hippocampus, and it triggers the memory of the graveyard and the denial and the rooster crowing, and it all comes rushing back. And Jesus walks Peter right back into the scene of the crime. And if I were Peter, I would be bracing for the lecture of a lifetime. Right? I would be expecting Jesus to go and be like, do you remember this, Peter? Do you remember the last time you were around this fire? But he doesn't do that. He doesn't shame Peter. He doesn't rub his nose in his failure. He brings him back to that fire because he knows that he has to treat the issue at its source. And so Jesus is going to overwrite the trauma. And look at what Jesus says in verses 10 through 14. Jesus said to them, bring some of the fish you have caught. So Simon Peter climbed back into the boat, dragged the net ashore. It was full of fish, 153. That probably makes sense. I don't know why. But even with so many in the net, it wasn't torn. And Jesus said to them, come and have breakfast. None of the disciples dared to ask, who are you? Because they knew it was the Lord. Jesus came and took bread and he gave it to them. And then he did the same with the fish. This was now the third time that Jesus appeared to his disciples after he was raised from the dead. There's no ledger or record keeping of their failures. There's no demand for a groveling apology. He simply looks at his friend who betrayed him and said, come and have breakfast with me. And I hope you see the beauty of what's happening. Jesus takes his undeniable, completely justified right to be right, and he sets it aside, and he steps into this dead space, and he initiates restoration. This is the heartbeat of the gospel. The only way that any of our broken relationships could ever survive. It's the first step of a long road, but grace is the oxygen of a dying relationship. Jesus breathes life back into this dead place, not by demanding an apology, but by serving breakfast by the beach. And it was just yesterday that I realized, oh my gosh, that's my favorite smell. And I hope it was linguiça, probably just fish. In doing so, though, he shows Peter and he shows us that our failures are not final. And no relationship is too dead for the Spirit of God to resurrect. I know it can seem that way, but if there's any shot at a dead relationship being brought back to life, starts with grace. And can I tell you that I have been on the end of receiving grace many times. 2 years into my job as a youth pastor here at the church, I overspent $10,000 on a mission trip to Mexico. I told all the parents that they could come for free, basically, and then got the bill. I'm like, whoops. I just couldn't do math. And I thought that was it. I thought that was the end of my story at Harbor Covenant Church. Sorry, Michael, you need to find another youth pastor. I was going to go look in some other field because no one was going to take me. And I didn't get that. Michael was completely gracious with my failure. He definitely made me learn some things and put some people in my life to build some better skills into my life. Like I had to go to Sheila Thomas every time I needed to spend money and be like, can I afford this? And she'd be like, probably. So these 2 moments have just shown what grace can do. It can bring hope into situations you think are done. And so the story goes, they finish breakfast, the ice is broken, and Jesus knows, though, that something in human nature, that sharing a meal is a great start, but if he stops there, that trauma is probably going to continue. If Jesus just fed Peter and walked away, Peter probably would still be haunted by that ghost. He would spend the rest of his life thinking maybe, yeah, he fed me because he's kind, and that's what he does, but he's never going to look at me the same way again. I denied him 3 times. And you can see that failure just haunt him. And so Jesus turns to Peter to finish repairing the relationship in verses 15 through 17. It says, when they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, he said, you know that I love you. And Jesus said, feed my lambs. Again, Jesus said, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And he answered, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And Jesus said, take care of my sheep. The 3rd time he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And I think this is where it hits. And Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the 3rd time, do you love me? And he said, Lord, you know all these things. You know that I love you. And Jesus said, feed my sheep. 3 times. Because I think Jesus was removing any doubt from Peter's mind about what Jesus thought about him. Peter denied him 3 times by a charcoal fire in John 18. And so Jesus gives Peter 3 chances to affirm his love around a new charcoal fire in John 21. Jesus goes into the exact place where the estrangement began, and he doesn't leave a single ghost behind. And then notice how Jesus seals this repair. With every answer, he says something like, feed my sheep. And psychologists will say that a relationship isn't fully repaired until the old dynamic has died away and a new one can be built. And that's hard work. That's not just an easy thing. This story looks great because it involves Jesus. I'm assuming your relationship involves not Jesus. It's going to be harder, but something new can be built. And this is exactly what Jesus is doing. He isn't just saying, I forgive you. He's saying, I trust you. I have a purpose for you. We are moving forward together. I want what's best for you. And this is what it looks like to have a resurrected relationship, is that you trade your right to be right for the will to reconcile. So as we close the time, I do want to challenge you to do something a little bit difficult before we leave the room. I want you to picture a specific relationship in your life that you're currently living in that has a dead space, that has a crime scene maybe. And I want you to face that in your mind. Now, you might approach this situation in 2 different camps. The first is you are the one who has been wronged. You're standing in Jesus's position. Maybe you were betrayed, or you were spoken to with contempt, or you were abandoned, and I want to validate your pain. I want to say that is not okay. But you hold the record, you hold the ledger, and you get to control the math, and it shows that you are owed. But I'm asking you, what is holding on to that doing to you actually? Is it bringing you life, or is it just isolating you? If you want a relationship to come back to life, you have to realize that the first step is that you're the one holding on to the oxygen. You're the one holding on to the gift of grace. And so my challenge to you is you have to be the one to make the first move. And that's difficult. And that could be something as simple as sending a text this week that just says, hey, I miss you. Can we talk? But maybe you're sitting here with that relationship in mind and you're in that second camp. Some of you might need to hear this message today because you relate more to Peter's situation. For those of you that have done the wronging, you're the one that broke the trust, that did that what you thought was unforgivable thing. You walked away when things got hard. Right now you might be drowning in shame. Shame is telling you it's over. Ain't no coming back from this. The relationship is dead. My challenge to you is get out of the boat. Peter was in a boat of shame in the middle of a lake fishing, and he saw Jesus, and he unashamedly just went after him. It's a little moment in the story that if you go back and you read, Peter has this full desire to do whatever it takes to be reconciled to his friend, to his Lord. And I think we can learn from Peter if we're in that situation. Stop hiding from your shame. Stop waiting for a time to magically just fix what is broken. It takes incredible humility to walk back into a situation or a fire that you started, knowing that you caused the pain, but you have to own your failure. That's where that first step is if you ever want to heal it. So pick up the phone, acknowledge the pain that you caused, bring a genuine repentance for a chance to restore something that is dead. And there are two camps, but realistically, in any situation, you're probably a little bit one foot in both of them. You need to be willing to forgive, and you also need to be willing to seek forgiveness. And so here is what I'm asking, is don't just listen to this nice story about Peter and then go to lunch. We are people of the resurrection. We believe in a God who can bring dead things back to life, even dead relationships when we think they're dead. And so here's your homework. In the next 48 hours, I want you to take one concrete step into a dead space. Drop that ledger. Get out of that boat. Send a text. Make a phone call. Do the hard, holy work of reconciliation. And then watch and pray for that same Spirit of God who raised Christ from the dead to breathe new life into your world and into your relationships. I'm not saying it's going to be easy. It's going to be painful, but it can happen. So here are 3 questions for you. The first is for your head. Is how is holding on to your right to be right actually keeping the relationship dead? The second is for your heart. What is it costing you to keep running from a dead relationship? And number 3 for your hands is what is one act of grace that you can give someone in your life with whom you have a dead relationship with?